The coffee was cold before I even took the first sip. It sat in the ceramic mug, a dark and stagnant pool reflecting the gray November sky that pressed against the kitchen window. Outside, the rain in Columbus had turned into a relentless, drizzling mist that coated the subdivision in a sheen of premature winter. Inside, the house was silent, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, suffocating quiet of a room where the air pressure has dropped just before a storm breaks. I stood by the granite island, the one we had installed 3 years ago on a payment plan that I was still chipping away at, and checked my watch. 7:15 in the morning. I was already running late for the logistics meeting at the depot, but my feet felt leaden, rooted to the hardwood floor. I was waiting. I did not know exactly what I was waiting for, but after 7 years of marriage to Emily, I had developed a sixth sense for the rhythm of her moods. And this morning, the rhythm was off. There was no sound of the shower running upstairs, no hum of the hairdryer, just the creak of floorboards moving closer to the stairs. When Emily finally entered the kitchen, the temperature in the room seemed to drop another 5 degrees. She was not dressed for her part-time shift at the salon. She was wearing her silk robe, the pale blue one I had bought her for our anniversary, wrapped tightly around her waist. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, messy bun, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, leaving her looking younger, but also strangely fragile. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She had been crying, or she had been preparing to cry. With Emily, the distinction was often blurred. "Morning," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the stillness. I reached for my briefcase, signaling that I was on my way out, trying to preempt whatever conversation was looming. "I have to get going, Em. Big shipment coming in from the coast." She did not look at me. She walked past the coffee machine, past the fruit bowl, and leaned against the refrigerator, crossing her arms over her chest. It was a defensive posture, but her eyes were locked on me with an intensity that made my stomach turn over. "I need $5,000, James." The words hung in the air between us, flat and heavy. I stopped with my hand on the handle of my briefcase. I blinked, sure I had misheard. We had just paid the mortgage, the car insurance, and the minimums on 2 credit cards. The account balance was sitting at a precarious 3 digits until my paycheck cleared on Friday. I let out a short, incredulous breath. "What?" "I need $5,000, she repeated, her voice steady but brittle like thin glass. "Today, by this evening." I turned fully to face her, the cold coffee forgotten. "Emily, we do not have $5,000. You know that. We went over the budget on Sunday. The account is almost empty until Friday." "What is this for? Is everyone okay? Is it your mom?" She shook her head, a sharp, jerky motion. "It is not my mom. It is for me. I have expenses, things I need to take care of, credit card things." My jaw tightened. We had a deal about the credit cards. 1 joint card for emergencies, 1 debit card for groceries. The rest were supposed to be cut up years ago after the incident with the jewelry store. "What credit card things?" I asked, my voice dropping, becoming dangerously calm. "I thought we paid off the Visa last year." "Emily, what did you buy?" She pushed herself off the refrigerator, her fragility hardening into something sharp. "Stop interrogating me like I am your employee, James. I am your wife. I made some mistakes, okay? I bought some things to make this house look decent, to make myself look presentable so you would not be embarrassed by me. And maybe I got a little behind, but I can fix it. I just need the money to clear the balance before it goes to collections." "Collections?" "Hier." The word was a physical blow. We pride ourselves on our credit score. It was the only reason we got the raid on this house. "How much is the total debt, Emily?" She looked away, biting her lip. "Just give me the 5,000. That will stop them from calling." I felt a headache blooming behind my eyes, a rhythmic thumping that matched my heartbeat. "No, I cannot just give you money we do not have for a debt you hid from me." We need to sit down, look at the statements, and figure this out. I can call the bank. We can work out a payment plan. But I am not draining our emergency fund, what little is left of it, without seeing the bill. Emily's face flushed. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a cold, desperate anger. I knew that look. It was the look of a cornered animal preparing to bite. You never support me, she spat out. You count every penny like a miser. You think you're so perfect with your spreadsheets in your logical little world. You do not understand what it is like to need things, to want to feel alive. I'm trying to keep a roof over our heads. I countered, my patience fraying. That is support. That is reality. Reality, she scoffed. She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. Okay, James, let's talk about reality. The reality is that I need that money today. And if you do not give it to me, if you walk out that door without transferring it, I'm going to make a call. I frowned, confused by the sudden shift in her tone. A call to whom? The bank? To Brian, she said. The name landed in the kitchen like a grenade. Brian, her ex-boyfriend from college. The one who came from old money. The one she had broken up with 6 months before she met me. The one whose name had not been spoken in this house for years, yet who always lingered in the background like a ghost of a life she thought she deserved. I froze. What does Brian have to do with this? He always said he would be there for me, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. He still messages me, you know, on birthdays, holidays. He asks how I am. He has plenty of money, James. He would not make me beg for a few $1,000s. He would give it to me in a heartbeat. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, numbing my extremities. Then call him, I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. If he is so generous, go ahead. She smiled, but it was a twisted, unhappy thing. Oh, I will. But it is not alone, James. Brian has always wanted one thing from me. And if I have to go to him to save my dignity because my husband is too cheap to help me, then I will give him what he wants. I stood paralyzed. The implication was clear, but my brain refused to process it. It was too melodramatic, too vile for a Tuesday morning in our suburban kitchen. Are you saying? I started, unable to finish the sentence. I am saying that if I do not have that notification on my phone by 5 o'clock, I am driving to his apartment, she said clearly, enunciating every word. I will spend the night there. I will let him do whatever he wants all night long. And I will come back here tomorrow morning, and you will know. You will look at me, and you will know exactly how I pay my debts. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the refrigerator compressor hum. I could hear the rain tapping against the glass. I looked at her, searching for a sign that this was a sick joke, a hysterical bluff. But her eyes were hard, glassy marbles. She meant it, or rather, she wanted me to believe she meant it enough to panic. She was selling herself to her ex-boyfriend to pay off a credit card bill, and she was holding our marriage hostage to make me sign the check. Something inside me broke. It was not a loud snap. It was a quiet, structural failure. Like a support beam giving way deep in the foundation of a building. The love, the concern, the desire to protect her. It all evaporated, replaced by a clarity so sharp it hurt. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. I saw the pettiness, the cruelty, the profound selfishness. I saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. I did not yell. I did not throw the mug. I did not plead. I took a slow breath, inhaling the scent of stale coffee and her expensive floral perfume. I hear you, I said. That was it. 3 words. I picked up my briefcase. I turned my back on her. I walked to the door into the garage. James, she called out, her voice rising in pitch, expecting the fight, expecting me to crumble. James, I am serious. 5 o'clock. Do not think I will not do it. I opened the door, stepped into the cool, damp air of the garage and pressed the button to close the door behind me, cutting off her voice. I got in my sedan, a reliable 4-year-old model with a car seat in the back that we had never used because she wasn't ready. I started the engine. My hand was shaking. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, forcing the tremors to stop. I backed out of the driveway, the wipers swiping rhythmically against the windshield. I drove toward the highway, but I did not take the exit for the logistics depot. I could not go to work. I could not sit in a meeting and discuss shipping lanes and fuel surcharges while my life was imploding. I needed to understand. The number 5,000 kept echoing in my mind. $5,000. It was a significant amount, yes, but not an insurmountable one. Why was she so desperate? Why the nuclear option? Why threaten the ultimate betrayal over a sum that, while painful, could be managed over a few months? It did not add up. The desperation in her eyes was not about a credit card collection agency. It was primal fear. I drove aimlessly for 20 minutes, the rain blurring the world outside. Then, clarity returned. I needed to see the damage. I needed to see the truth, not the sanitized version she fed me. I pulled into the parking lot of our bank branch. It was a brick building with large glass windows, looking sturdy and reliable. I had been banking here for a decade. I knew the branch manager, Mr. Henderson. We exchanged Christmas cards. I turned off the ignition and sat in the car for a moment. The rain drummed on the roof. If I went in there, I would find out the truth. And once I knew the truth, there was no going back. The ultimatum she gave me, the threat of Brian, was the end of the marriage emotionally. But what I was about to do was the forensic audit of the corpse. I stepped out into the rain and walked briskly to the doors. The bank was quiet, smelling of floor wax and old paper. A few tellers were behind the counter, but the lobby was empty. Mr. Henderson saw me from his glass-walled office and waved, though his smile faltered slightly when he saw my expression. I must have looked like a man walking to the gallows. He stood up and opened his door. "James, good to see you. You're soaking wet. Everything all right?" I walked into his office and sat down in a leather chair without taking off my coat. I did not have time for pleasantries. "I need to see everything, David," I said, my voice flat. "I need full statements for all accounts with my name on them. Joint checking, savings, the mortgage, the credit lines. Everything. Going back 2 years. David frowned, adjusting his glasses. "Of course, James. You can access all that online, you know." "I cannot," I said. "Emily changed the passwords last month. Said we needed better security. I trusted her. I need you to print them. Now." David nodded slowly, sensing the gravity of the situation. He turned to his computer, his fingers clacking on the keyboard. The silence in the room was thick. I stared at the framed photo of his family on the desk, a wife, 2 kids, a dog. It looked like a postcard from a planet I could no longer inhabit. I watched his face. For a minute, he was just typing, his expression neutral. Then he stopped. He squinted at the screen. He clicked the mouse a few times, leaning closer. His brow furrowed. He looked up at me, then back at the screen, then back at me. There was something in his eyes. Pity? Alarm? "James," he said carefully, "are you aware of the activity on the home equity line?" I froze. "We do not have a home equity line. We talked about it for renovations last year, but we decided against it." David turned the monitor slightly away, as if trying to shield me from a physical blow. "James, there's a second mortgage on your property. A HELOC. It was opened 8 months ago." The room seemed to tilt. "That is impossible," I said. "I never signed for that. I would have had to come in here. Notaries. Witnesses." "It was done remotely," David said, his voice quiet. "Electronic signatures are common now. But the paperwork was filed. The funds were disbursed into the joint checking and then immediately transferred out to an external account. Transferred where? I asked, my mouth dry as dust. To an account under the name Stock Enterprises LLC. And another one, Lux Lifestyle Ventures. I stared at him. I had never heard those names. How much? I whispered. How much is the line for? David hesitated. The total line is for $100,000. It is fully drawn. $100,000. The number was so large it was abstract. It was not a car. It was not a renovation. It was a theft of catastrophic proportions. There is more, David said, and his tone was truly apologetic now. The payments on this line, they have not been made for 3 months. The primary mortgage is also behind. James, the house is in pre-foreclosure. The bank sent notices. Certified mail. I never saw them, I said dully. She gets the mail. She is usually home before me. She has been intercepting them. I sat back in the chair, the leather creaking, the ceiling tiles blurred. $100,000, plus the mortgage arrears, plus the $5,000 she needed today. It wasn't a shopping addiction. You don't spend $100,000 at the mall without filling the house with boxes. This was something else. Gambling? Drugs? Blackmail? Or just a level of delusional financial mismanagement that bordered on insanity. I need to see the signature, I said. On the loan documents. David printed a page and slid it across the desk. I looked at the bottom of the sheet. There was my name, James A. Miller. The loop of the J was too wide. The slant was wrong. It was a good attempt, but it wasn't mine. It was Emily's hand trying to be mine. She forged my signature. She stole the equity in our home. She stopped paying the mortgage. And now, when the walls were finally closing in, when the bank was days away from taking the house, she demanded $5,000 to throw into the black hole, threatening to sleep with her ex-boyfriend if I didn't provide it. She wasn't just a bad wife. She was a criminal. She had systematically dismantled our life while I was at work, smiling at me across the dinner table, talking about our future while she torched the ground beneath our feet. I looked up at David. The shock was receding, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I felt like a surgeon looking at a gangrenous limb. There was no saving it. There was only amputation. David, I said, I want to freeze everything. The joint accounts, the credit cards. I want to report fraud on this loan. James, if you report fraud, that initiates a criminal investigation. If it was Emily, I know I cut him off. I looked at the signature again. That jagged, fake J. It looked like a scar. Freeze it, I said, and remove my authorization from her secondary card. Today. Right now. But she will be declined if she tries to use it, David warned. I stood up. I buttoned my coat. I thought about the text message I had just received. A photo of her hand resting on her thigh. A manipulative promise of what she would give Brian. I know, I said. That is the point. I walked out of the bank. The rain was falling harder now, a deluge washing over the parking lot. I got into my car and sat there for a long time. I looked at my phone. I opened the banking app. I watched as the accounts turned gray, locked one by one. I was not going to pay the $5,000. I was not going to save her. She had set a price on our marriage. She thought the price was money. She was wrong. The price was the truth. And she had just bankrupted us both. I started the car. I wasn't going to work. I wasn't going home. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years, a college friend who practiced family law. Hey, Mark, I said when he answered. I need a favor. A big one. I need you to draft some papers. Today. I put the car in gear. The road ahead was gray and wet, but for the first time in years, I could see exactly where it was going. The ultimatum had been delivered. The deadline was 5 o'clock. I checked the dashboard clock. It was 10:30. Let the clock run out, I whispered to the empty car. I drove out of the lot, leaving the old James Miller behind in the rain. The man driving the car now was someone else entirely, and he was done being a victim. The rain had not let up. If anything, it had intensified, transforming from a morning drizzle into a relentless, hammering downpour that seemed determined to wash the city of Columbus off the map. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a generic strip mall 3 miles from our subdivision, the engine idling just to keep the heater running. The windows were fogged up, isolating me in a gray, humid cocoon. I stared at the digital clock on the dashboard. 11:42. I had just finished a 40-minute phone call with Mark. I hadn't spoken to him in 3 years, not since a barbecue where Emily had made a snide comment about his wife's cooking that had cooled the friendship instantly. Yet when he heard my voice, and more importantly, when he heard the tremor I couldn't quite suppress, he switched instantly into professional mode. He was a divorce attorney now, a shark in a suit who specialized in forensic accounting. I had told him everything. The demand for $5,000. The threat regarding Brian. And then, the bomb that had dropped in Mr. Henderson's office. The second mortgage, the forged signature, the $100,000 of equity that had vanished into thin air. Mark had been silent for a long time after I finished. When he finally spoke, his voice was devoid of the jovial warmth I remembered from college. It was cold, sharp, and terrified me more than the bank manager had. He told me I was in a combat zone. He told me that what Emily had done wasn't just a marital indiscretion. It was a felony. He used words like grand larceny, fraud, and identity theft. He told me that if I didn't act immediately, I could be liable for half of that debt, or worse, lose the house entirely and still owe the money. Do not leave the house, James, he had said, his instructions precise. If you leave, she can claim abandonment. It weakens your position for the asset division. You have to go back there. You have to live there. And you have to secure the perimeter. Secure the perimeter. It sounded like military jargon, absurd for a man who managed logistics for a trucking company. But as I looked at my phone, I realized he was right. I wasn't fighting a war with guns. I was fighting a war with information and access. I picked up my phone. The screen glowed bright in the gloom of the car. I opened the banking app again. It was time to drop the guillotine. My thumb hovered over the cards tab. I could see the list. My debit card, the joint credit card, and her supplementary card, the one she carried in her purse, the one she used for groceries, gas, and, as I now knew, 1,000 other lies. I didn't feel angry in that moment. I felt a strange, detached sorrow. I was about to cut off the lifeline of the woman I had sworn to protect. But then the image of the forged signature flashed in my mind, that shaky, jagged attempt to be me. She had stolen my name. She had stolen our future. I tapped Report Lost/Stolen. The app asked for confirmation. Are you sure you want to deactivate this card? This action cannot be undone. I pressed yes. I did the same for the joint credit card. Then I went into the settings for the main checking account and changed the password. Then the savings. Then the email associated with the bank alerts. I locked every digital door I could find. I was sealing the airlocks on a sinking ship. I sat back, exhaling a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was done. She was out in the world, believing she had the upper hand, believing her ultimatum had cowed me into submission. She thought I was scrambling to find $5,000 to buy her loyalty. Instead, I had just ensured that she couldn't buy a pack of gum. I put the car in gear and drove out of the parking lot. I wasn't going to the office. I was going home. I needed to be there before she returned. I needed to see the house through clear eyes, without her presence distorting the reality. The drive back to the subdivision was a blur of gray asphalt and red taillights. I turned onto our street, Maple Drive. It looked the same as it always did. Manicured lawns, basketball hoops and driveways, the illusion of suburban tranquility. I pulled into our driveway. The house, a 2-story colonial with white siding and black shutters, loomed in the rain. It looked substantial. It looked expensive. It looked like a lie. I parked the car and walked to the front door, bypassing the garage. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The silence of the house greeted me, But this time, it felt different. It felt like a crime scene. I took off my wet coat and hung it up. I walked into the living room. I looked at the furniture, the velvet sofa she had insisted on, the antique coffee table, the expensive curtains. I used to look at these things and see a home. Now I looked at them and saw the price tag. I saw the interest rates. I saw the debt. I went into the kitchen. The coffee mug from this morning was still on the counter, a cold testament to the conversation that had ended my marriage. I poured the stagnant liquid down the sink and rinsed the cup. I was moving on autopilot. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the bank app. Transaction declined. Visa X 4490 at Nordstrom. Amount $450. 00. I stared at the screen. She was shopping. She had threatened to destroy our marriage at 7 a.m. And by noon, she was at Nordstrom trying to spend $450. The audacity was breathtaking. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't anxious. She was confident. She thought I would never dare to cut her off. I felt a dark satisfaction curl in my stomach. It wasn't happiness, but it was close. It was the feeling of finally fighting back. 5 minutes later, another buzz. Transaction declined. Visa X 4490 at Nordstrom. Amount $450. 00. She had tried again. She probably thought it was a chip error. She was likely smiling at the cashier, making a self-deprecating joke about technology, wiping the chip on her sleeve. 2 minutes later, transaction declined. Visa X 4490 at Nordstrom. Amount $20. 00. She was trying a smaller amount. Testing the waters. Panic would be setting in now. The smile would be slipping. The cashier would be looking at her with that polite, pitying stare. The people in line behind her would be shifting their weight, checking their watches. I put the phone on the counter and walked upstairs. I went into the master bedroom. The bed was unmade, the sheets tangled. I looked at the closet. It was bursting with clothes, designer labels, shoes that cost more than my first car, handbags wrapped in dust covers. I realized now that I wasn't looking at a wardrobe. I was looking at the debris of the $100,000. I walked to the closet and pulled out my suitcase, the one I used for business trips. I didn't pack her things. I packed mine. I took my suits, my shirts, my underwear. I went to the bathroom and took my toiletries. I wasn't leaving the house, but I was leaving the marriage. I carried the suitcase down the hall to the guest bedroom, the small room we had jokingly called the nursery when we first moved in, back when we thought we could afford children. I threw the suitcase on the bed. The room smelled musty and used. I opened the window a crack to let in the damp, fresh air. I sat down on the edge of the bare mattress and waited. It took 40 minutes. I heard the garage door rumble open beneath me. The vibration traveled up through the floorboards. Then the sound of the car door slamming, hard. A pause. Then the door from the garage to the kitchen opened. James! Her voice was a shriek. It tore through the house, shattering the silence. It wasn't the voice of the fragile, weeping woman from this morning. It was the voice of pure, unadulterated rage. I didn't move. I stayed sitting on the guest bed, my hands clasped between my knees. I heard her footsteps stomping across the hardwood floor of the kitchen, then the living room. James, where are you? She was coming up the stairs. I heard her heavy breathing, the frantic pace. She burst into the master bedroom. Then, finding it empty, she spun around and saw the open door of the guest room. She stood in the doorway, wet from the rain, her hair plastered to her forehead. She was still wearing the trench coat she had left in. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild. She looked like a vengeful spirit. What did you do? She screamed. She held up her credit card like a weapon. I was at the checkout. I had a line of people behind me. It was declined. They said it was reported lost or stolen. I looked at her calmly. I felt strangely invincible. The fear I had lived with for years, The fear of upsetting her, the fear of her moods was gone. It was reported stolen, I said. Stolen? She took a step into the room. Are you insane? I had it. You knew I had it. How dare you humiliate me like that? Do you know how embarrassing that was? I stood up slowly. I walked over to the window and looked out at the rain. I reported it stolen because it is being used by a thief, I said, without turning around. There was a silence, a sharp intake of breath. What did you call me? Her voice dropped, dangerous and low. I turned to face her. I didn't shout. I kept my voice level, conversational. I went to the bank, Emily. I spoke to David Henderson. The color drained from her face so fast, it was like watching a light switch flip. Her mouth opened, then closed. The rage evaporated, replaced by a sudden, frantic calculation. I could see the gears turning behind her eyes, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much she could deny. I know about the home equity line, I said. I know about the $100,000. I saw the signature, the one that is supposed to be mine, but isn't. She took a step back, leaning against the doorframe for support. James, wait. You do not understand. I can explain. It was an investment. I was trying to help us. I met this consultant, and he said, Stop, I said. I raised a hand. I did not want to hear about consultants. I did not want to hear about investments. The money is gone, isn't it? She bit her lip, tears welling up instantly. It was a reflex for her, a defense mechanism. It is tied up right now, but I can get it back. I just need time, and I needed that $5,000 today to pay the bridge loan so the investment would mature. If you had just given it to me. You're lying, I said. I said it simply like stating the color of the sky. You are lying about the investment. You are lying about the bridge loan. You spent it. I do not know on what, and frankly, right now, I do not care. Maybe it was clothes. Maybe it was gambling. Maybe you were sending it to someone. It does not matter. It does matter. She cried, tears spilling over. I did it for us. I wanted us to have a better life. I wanted to surprise you. You forged my signature, I repeated. That is a felony, Emily. That is prison time. She flinched. The reality of the word prison seemed to hit her. She looked at me, and her expression shifted again. The sorrow vanished. The calculation returned, sharper this time. She realized that crying wasn't working. She realized that I wasn't rushing to comfort her. So that is it, she said, her voice hardening. You're going to hold a mistake over my head. After everything I have done for you, I gave you the best years of my life, James. I could have had anyone. And here we were. The pivot. The classic maneuver. I am done, Emily, I said. I blocked the accounts. I am filing for divorce. The lawyer is drafting the papers now. She laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Divorce? You think you can just dump me? You think I will make it easy? I will take you for everything. I will tell everyone what a controlling, abusive monster you are. I will tell them you forced me to sign those papers. Go ahead, I said. The bank has timestamps, digital footprints. They have the IP address from where the loan was originated. I was at work. You were here. It is all traceable. She stared at me with pure hatred. She realized she was losing the logical argument. She had no ground to stand on. So she reached for the only weapon she had left, the nuclear option. You're pathetic, she spat. You are a small, sad little man. You know why I did it? Because I was bored. Because living with you is like living with a corpse. You have no passion. You have no fire. I said nothing. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking, but she looked triumphant. You remember what I said this morning? She asked, her voice trembling with adrenaline. About 5 o'clock? I checked my watch. It is 1:30. I am not waiting, she said. If you're going to treat me like a criminal, I am going to treat you like nothing. I am calling Brian. Right now. She unlocked her phone. She tapped the screen aggressively, making sure I saw every movement. I'm going to put him on speaker, she said, her eyes locked on mine. I want you to hear him. I want you to hear him tell me to come over. I want you to hear how much he wants me. And then I'm going to leave, and I am not coming back tonight. Go ahead, I said. My lack of reaction seemed to infuriate her further. She pressed the call button. The ringing sound filled the small room, amplified by the speakerphone. Ring, ring, ring. She smirked at me. He picks up on the first ring usually, she taunted. Ring, ring. Her smile faltered slightly. She shifted her weight. He must be in a meeting, she muttered. Then the line clicked. Hello. It was a male voice. Deep, distracted. Brian. Emily's face lit up. She brought the phone closer to her mouth, her eyes gleaming with vindication. Brian? It is me, Emily. There was a pause on the other end. A long, heavy pause. Who? Emily. Emily Miller. From college? I watched her face. The triumph was flickering, replaced by a sudden confusion. Oh, the voice said. The tone shifted. It wasn't warm. It wasn't welcoming. It was annoyed. Jesus, Emily. How did you get this number? I changed it 6 months ago. Emily froze. She glanced at me, then back at the phone. Brian, do not be silly. You gave it to me. Listen, I need to see you. I was thinking about you today. About us. There was a sigh on the other end. A sound of profound exhaustion. Emily, there is no us. There hasn't been an us for 8 years. Why are you calling me? Is this about money again? The color in Emily's face went from pale to a blotchy, horrified red. She tried to talk over him. No, it is not about money. I miss you. I wanted to come over. Maybe tonight? We could have some wine, just catch up. Stop, Brian said. His voice was sharp now. Cutting. Listen to me. I do not know what kind of delusional game you are playing, but you need to stop. I blocked you on Instagram. I blocked your email. If you show up at my apartment again like you did last year, I'm calling the cops. My fiancé doesn't need this drama. Fiancé? The word whispered out of Emily's mouth. Yeah, we're getting married in June. Brian's voice softened, but only with pity, not affection. Look, Emily, get help. Seriously, stop calling me. Click. The line went dead. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever experienced. It was a physical weight, crushing the air out of the room. The only sound was the rain hammering against the window pane. Emily stood there, the phone still held out in front of her like a shield that had turned into paper. She stared at the black screen. Her mouth was slightly open. The destruction of her narrative was total. She had told me for years that he was the one that got away. She had used him as a phantom to make me jealous, to make me feel inadequate. She had built an entire mythology around Brian, that he was pining for her, that he was her safety net. And in 30 seconds, on speakerphone, the reality had shattered it. He wasn't pining. He was afraid of her. He was engaged. He thought she was crazy. I looked at her. I didn't feel the triumph I thought I would. I felt a deep, sickening embarrassment. Not for me, but for her. It was pathetic. It was so deeply, profoundly sad that I almost looked away. So I said quietly, "That is Brian." Emily slowly lowered her hand. She didn't look at me. She couldn't. Her entire posture collapsed. The arrogance, the rage, the defiance, it all drained out of her, leaving behind something small and broken. "He is lying," she whispered. She was staring at the floor. "He is just saying that because he is scared of his fiancée." "Emily," I said. "Stop. Just stop." She looked up at me then. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terrifying vacancy. She looked like a child who had been caught stealing and realized there was no excuse left to invent. "He used to love me," she said, her voice cracking. "He did." I walked over to the suitcase. I unzipped the front pocket and took out the charger for my phone. "I'm going to stay in this room," I said. "I will install a lock on the door tomorrow. You can have the master bedroom. We will live separately until the house is sold." "Sold?" she echoed. the words seemingly meaningless to her. Yes, the bank is taking it, Emily. Unless we sell it first to pay off the debt you created. We are losing everything. The house, the cars, the lifestyle is all gone. She shook her head slowly. No, you can fix it. You always fix it. You're the provider, James. You have to fix it. I looked at her one last time before I walked to the door of the guest room and closed it. I'm not the provider anymore, I said, and I cannot fix people. I closed the door. I didn't lock it. I didn't have a lock yet, but I dragged the heavy oak dresser across the floor and pushed it against the frame. It was a crude barricade, but it would hold. I sat down on the bed and listened. For a long time, there was silence from the hallway. Then I heard a sound, a low, keening wail. It wasn't a scream. It was the sound of an animal caught in a trap, realizing that the leg is broken and the hunter is coming. She was crying, but this time I knew it wasn't a performance. It was the sound of her reality crashing down around her. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me exhausted. My hands were still shaking. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't sleep. I could still hear Brian's voice. Get help. Seriously. I was alone in a barricaded room in a house that wasn't mine anymore, married to a stranger who had bankrupted us both. The war had officially begun, and the scariest part was that I knew she wasn't done. The humiliation with Brian wouldn't stop her. It would only make her more desperate, and a desperate enemy is the most dangerous kind. I reached for my phone and sent a text to Mark. She is home. It went bad. Proceed with the filing immediately. I put the phone on my chest and listened to the rain. It was going to be a long night. The sound of a drill biting into wood is distinct. It is a high-pitched, mechanical whine that vibrates through the bones of your hand and echoes in the empty spaces of a house. On Wednesday evening, 24 hours after the revelation at the bank, that sound was the only thing breaking the silence of our home. I was installing a deadbolt on the door of the guest bedroom. It was a heavy-duty lock, the kind meant for exterior doors, for keeping the world out. I was installing it on an interior hollow-core door in a suburban colonial to keep my wife out. The absurdity of the action was not lost on me, but neither was the necessity. I had spent the previous night pushing a dresser against the frame, waking up at every creak of the floorboards, imagining her standing there in the hallway, watching, planning. I could not live like that. If I was going to survive the next few months until the foreclosure or the sale, I needed a sanctuary. I needed a place where I could close my eyes and know, with absolute certainty, that I was alone. I tightened the final screw and tested the mechanism. The bolt slid into the strike plate with a solid, satisfying thud. Click, thud, click, thud. It was the sound of a border being drawn. I stepped back and looked at the white door. It looked the same as it had yesterday, but now it had a silver eye staring back at me. I wiped the sawdust from the floor with a wet paper towel, treating the task with the meticulous care of a crime scene cleaner. I did not want to leave a trace. I did not want to give her an opening to complain about the mess. When I finally emerged from the room, the hallway was dark. The house was quiet, but it was a heavy, populated quiet. I knew she was downstairs. I could smell it. The scent of roasting chicken, garlic, and rosemary drifted up the stairs. It was a smell from a different life. It was the smell of Sunday afternoons from 3 years ago, before the secrets, before the debt. It was a smell that should have triggered hunger and comfort. Instead, it triggered a wave of nausea. It was a trap. I walked down the stairs slowly, my hand gliding over the banister. I needed water. I had a case of bottled water in my trunk, but I had forgotten to bring it up to my room, and I refused to retreat to my car like a frightened tenant. This was still my house. My name was on the deed, even if that deed was now effectively worthless. I turned the corner into the kitchen. The scene before me was so aggressively normal, it felt like a hallucination. Emily was standing by the stove. She was wearing an apron, a floral thing she hadn't worn in years. Her hair was brushed and tied back with a ribbon. She was basting a chicken in the oven, the golden skin crackling under the heat. The table was set. 2 placemats, 2 wine glasses, a candle flickering in the center. She heard me enter and turned. Her face was composed, her expression soft, bordering on serene. There was no trace of the screaming woman from yesterday, no trace of the desperate creature who had called her ex-boyfriend on speakerphone. She looked like a 1950s housewife in a magazine advertisement. "Dinner's almost ready, James," she said. Her voice was light, musical. "I made your favorite, lemon and rosemary, and I found a bottle of that Pinot Noir you like in the back of the pantry." I stood by the refrigerator, keeping the island between us. I stared at her, trying to process the psychological pivot. This was the denial phase weaponized. She had decided that if she acted like everything was fine, then everything would be fine. She was trying to rewrite reality through sheer force of performance. "I'm not hungry," I said. I reached into the fridge and grabbed a pitcher of filter water. "You have to eat," she said, her smile faltering just a fraction, a tiny crack in the porcelain. "We need to talk, James. Civilly. We can't just ignore each other. We are husband and wife." I poured water into a glass, watching the liquid swirl. "We are barely that, Emily. I told you. The lawyer is filing the papers. This," I gestured to the table, the candle, the apron. "This doesn't change anything." She closed the oven door gently and took a step toward me. She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, the eyes that had worked on me for 7 years. The eyes that had convinced me she was vulnerable, that she needed saving. "I know you are angry," she said softly, "and you have every right to be. I made a mess. I know that. But James, people make mistakes. Marriages go through hard times. We promised. For richer or for poorer. Remember?" I almost laughed. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. "For poorer is one thing, Emily," I said, my voice steady. "Fraud is another. You didn't just lose money. You stole it. You stole my signature. You stole my trust. You looked me in the eye every day for 8 months and lied. That isn't a hard time. That is a character defect." Her face hardened, just for a second, before she smoothed it back into the mask of the penitent wife. "I was trying to build something for us," she insisted, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "It wasn't stealing. It was leverage. I was going to pay it back. I just needed a little more time. If you would just sit down and listen to the business plan, instead of acting like a judge and jury." I set the glass down on the counter with a sharp click. "There is no business plan, Emily. There is only $100,000 of debt and a foreclosure notice." I turned to leave. I couldn't be in this room. The smell of the rosemary was suffocating me. "James, wait," she called out. "If you walk away now, you are the one giving up. You are the one breaking the vows." I didn't look back. I walked up the stairs, entered my room, and locked the deadbolt. Thud. I sat on the edge of the bed and drank the water in the dark. I could hear her downstairs. She was moving dishes. Then, a few minutes later, I heard the sound of silverware scraping against china. She was eating dinner alone at the candlelit table. The sound was rhythmic, deliberate. Clink, scrape, clink. It was the loneliest sound I had ever heard. The next 2 days passed in a suffocating haze of cold tension. I developed a routine to minimize contact. I left for work at 6 in the morning, before she was awake. I stayed at the office until 8 in the evening, eating vending machine sandwiches or grabbing fast food in my car. When I came home, I went straight to my room. But while the house was silent, the world outside was getting loud. On Thursday afternoon, I was at my desk, trying to route a shipment of automotive parts to Detroit when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my sister, Sarah. "James, is everything okay? Emily posted something really worrying on Facebook." Call me. My stomach dropped. I hadn't checked social media. I had been too busy trying to salvage my credit rating. I opened a Facebook app on my phone. There it was. A long, rambling post on Emily's wall, posted 2 hours ago. It had no picture, just a block of text against a somber gray background. I don't usually air my dirty laundry here, but I don't know where else to turn. I am scared. I have been cut off from all my bank accounts without warning. I have no money for food or gas. My husband has locked himself in the guest room and refuses to speak to me. I feel so alone and trapped. I thought I knew the man I married, but money changes people. Please, if anyone can help or just pray for me, I would appreciate it. I just want to survive this. It was a masterpiece of omission. No mention of the forged loan. No mention of the Nordstrom trips. No mention of Brian. Just the image of a helpless woman being financially abused by a tyrant husband. The comments were already piling up. Mutual friends, her cousins, people from our church. Oh my God, Emily, I am so sorry. This is financial abuse. You need to call the hotline. James? I never thought he was like that. Stay strong, hun. Do you need a place to stay? I felt the blood rush to my face. A mixture of shame and fury. She was controlling the narrative. She knew I was a private person, that I wouldn't start a comment war on Facebook. She was banking on my silence. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall. I wanted to type a reply, to upload the PDF of the forged loan document, to scream the truth to the digital world. But I knew it wouldn't matter. The truth was complicated. The victimhood was simple. People consumed simple. I closed the app. I didn't call my sister. I couldn't explain it yet. I sent a text. It's complicated, Sarah. She is unwell. I am handling it. Please don't engage with her. I put the phone down and stared at my computer screen. The numbers on the spreadsheet blurred. I was being isolated. She was building a wall of social pressure around me, hoping I would crack, hoping I would unlock the accounts just to stop the whispers. It was a siege, and I was losing the public relations battle. But something in her post stuck with me. Money changes people. It was such a projection. And then, her words from the kitchen. I was trying to build something for us. The business plan. She kept mentioning a business. Even in her lies, there was usually a grain of twisted truth. She hadn't spent the money on vacations. Her passport was in the safe and used for years. She hadn't bought a new car. The clothes in the closet were expensive, yes, but they didn't add up to $100,000 plus the mortgage arrears. That kind of money leaves a footprint. Where did it go? I left work early on Friday. I didn't go home. I parked down the street, watching the house. At 2 p.m., the garage door opened. Emily backed out in her SUV. She was dressed up, wearing sunglasses. She turned left, heading toward the highway. As soon as her car disappeared around the bend, I drove into the driveway. I had maybe an hour. I entered the house. It felt illicit, breaking into my own life. I went straight to the home office. I tore through the desk drawers. Nothing. Just utility bills and old birthday cards. I checked the nightstands in the master bedroom. Nothing. Then I remembered the garage. We had a 2-car garage, but we only parked 1 car in it. The other side was filled with storage, plastic bins stacked floor to ceiling, blocked by a wall of old holiday decorations, artificial Christmas trees, and boxes of winter coats. It was Emily's domain. She always said it was seasonal stuff and became agitated whenever I suggested organizing it. I walked into the garage. The air was cold and smelled of gasoline and dry leaves. I looked at the wall of boxes. It looked innocuous, a suburban barricade. I started pulling down the boxes of Christmas ornaments. They were light, rattling with plastic baubles. I moved the artificial tree. Behind the holiday facade, there was another layer of boxes. These were different. They were uniform brown cardboard shipping boxes, taped shut, stacked with industrial precision. There were dozens of them, maybe 100. I pulled one down. It was heavy. I took a utility knife from the workbench and slit the tape. Inside, nestled in packing peanuts, were rows of pink and gold bottles. Lux & Company, Revitalizing Serum. I picked one up. It looked cheap, the label slightly askew. I opened another box. Lux & Company, Dietary Supplements. Another box. Lux & Company, Volumizing Shampoo. I stepped back, looking at the wall of cardboard. It wasn't just a few boxes. It was an inventory, a warehouse. I started moving more boxes frantically now. They were all the same. Thousands of bottles, thousands of jars. Some of the boxes near the bottom were crushed, water damage from snow melt off the car. I checked the dates on a bottle of vitamins. EXP, August 2024. They were already expired. I pulled out my phone and searched for Lux & Company. The results were immediate. It was a direct sales opportunity, a multi-level marketing company, a pyramid scheme. The website was full of pictures of smiling women in evening gowns standing next to luxury cars, holding giant checks. Be your own boss. Retire by 30. Financial freedom. I scrolled through the compensation plan. To reach the Diamond Executive level, the level where you got the car bonus and the recognition, you had to move a certain volume of product every month. If you couldn't sell it, you could buy it yourself to keep your status. I looked at the wall of boxes. She hadn't sold any of it. She had bought it. All of it. I did the mental math. To maintain the status she wanted, to look like a success to her team and her online followers, she had to spend thousands a month. She was buying her own inventory, storing it in the garage, and pretending it was flying off the shelves. I found a binder in one of the open boxes. It was her business ledger. I flipped through it. It was a tragic document. January. Sales, $200. Purchases, $4,500. February. Sales, $50. Purchases, $5,000. March. Sales, $0. Purchases, $8,000. Inventory loading for Diamond Push. She was bleeding money to pretend she was making money. She had taken a second mortgage not to feed a drug habit or a gambling addiction, but to feed an ego addiction. She wanted to be the woman on the website. She wanted to be successful so badly that she had bankrupted us to role-play it. I sat down on a cooler, surrounded by the towering monuments of her failure. It was pathetic. It was horrifying. It was so incredibly stupid. But it explained everything. The desperation, the secrecy, the need for the $5,000 on Tuesday. It was likely the buy-in for a new product launch or a deadline to keep her rank. The threat about Brian was just a distraction, a way to get the cash without admitting that her empire was a pile of rotting cardboard in the garage. She wasn't a criminal mastermind. She was a mark. A victim of a predatory scam who had become a predator in her own home to keep the fantasy alive. I heard the rumble of the garage door opening. I didn't move. I sat there, holding a bottle of expired serum as daylight flooded the dark garage. Emily's SUV pulled in. She didn't see me at first. The wall of boxes usually hid this corner. She got out of the car, humming to herself. She was holding a shopping bag from a grocery store, probably bought with cash she had scrounged or borrowed from the friends she had lied to on Facebook. She walked around the back of the car and stopped. She saw the moved boxes. She saw the Christmas tree pushed aside. And then she saw me. She dropped the grocery bag. A carton of eggs cracked, yellow yolk oozing onto the concrete. "James," she whispered. I stood up slowly. I held up the pink bottle. "Lux & Company," I said. My voice was devoid of anger. I was too tired for anger. I was just sad. She stared at the bottle, her face crumbling. The mask of the victim, the mask of the housewife, they all fell away. All that was left was the panic of a child caught playing dress-up with scissors. It is inventory," she stammered. "For the holiday rush. I have pre-orders. It is going to move fast." "Emily," I said gently, This expires in 2024. It is garbage. It is toxic waste. She shook her head, tears starting to flow. No, you don't understand the business model. You have to invest to grow. I am a diamond executive. I have a downline. You have a garage full of unsellable plastic, I said, and $100,000 debt. This is it. This is where the house went. Into face cream. She rushed forward, grabbing the bottle from my hand. Give it to me. You are ruining the organization. I have a system. She was frantic, trying to push the boxes back, trying to hide the evidence again, as if covering it up would make the money come back. Stop, I said. I grabbed her wrists. Not roughly, just firmly enough to stop her flailing. It is over, Emily. The game is over. There is no business. There is no diamond level. There's just us, broke, in a house the bank owns. She went limp in my grip. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the depth of her delusion. She truly believed it. She had brainwashed herself. She believed that if she just bought one more box, one more shipment, the millions would roll in. I just wanted to be someone, she sobbed, her body shaking. I just wanted you to be proud of me. You're always so successful. You always have it together. I wanted to bring home a check. I wanted to show you. I let go of her hands. I stepped back. I would have been proud if you worked at a checkout counter, I said. I would have been proud if you did nothing. But this is a lie, and you made me pay for the ticket to watch it. I walked past her, out of the garage, into the house. James! She screamed after me, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. James, help me move it back. Please. If the humidity gets to it, it ruins the packaging. I didn't stop. I walked into the kitchen, picked up my keys, and walked out the front door. I couldn't be in the house with her. I couldn't be in the house with the boxes. I sat in my car on the street, staring at the closed garage door. I realized then that the divorce wouldn't be a battle of assets. There were no assets. It would be an exorcism. I was married to a cult member of one. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank app. Not mine, but a shared alert I hadn't managed to turn off for her email. Payment overdue. Lux & Company. Monthly auto ship. $2,400. 00. She had tried to process another order. Today, even with the accounts frozen, even with the garage full, the machine kept eating and she kept feeding it. I started the car. I needed to go to the lawyer. I needed to show him the pictures of the garage. I needed to prove that the money wasn't hidden in an offshore account, but rotting in our own home. The Cold War was over. The investigation was over. Now it was just a cleanup operation. And the mess was bigger than I could have ever imagined. The mahogany conference table in Mark's office was vast, a glossy expanse of dark wood that seemed to stretch out like a frozen lake. On its surface, the debris of my marriage was spread out in high-definition color. There were the bank statements with the jagged, forged signatures. There were the foreclosure notices that had been hidden in the trash. And now, adding a surreal layer to the tragedy, there were the photographs I had taken in the garage. The towering walls of cardboard boxes. The thousands of bottles of expired serum. The physical manifestation of a delusion that had cost $100,000. Mark, my attorney and old college friend, sat on the other side of the table. He was usually a man of quick wit and cynical humor, the kind of lawyer who enjoyed the game of litigation. But today he was silent. He picked up a photo of a box labeled Lux & Company, Diamond Reserve, studied it, and then set it down with a heavy sigh. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture of profound fatigue. James, he said quietly, I have seen gambling debts. I have seen hidden families in other states. I have seen assets funneled into offshore crypto accounts. But this is a new one. It is a pyramid scheme, I said, my voice flat. She bought her own inventory to maintain a rank. She wanted the title. She wanted the validation. Mark put his glasses back on. It is not just a pyramid scheme, James. Legally speaking, This is dissipation of marital assets on a catastrophic scale. But coupled with the forgery, he tapped the handwriting analysis report that had arrived that morning. This is the smoking gun. The expert confirms with 99% certainty that the signature on the home equity line is not yours. It shows signs of simulation, tremors, hesitation marks, incorrect pen pressure. He looked me in the eye, his expression grim. This changes the entire complexion of the divorce. We're not just looking at a division of debt. We're looking at criminal fraud. If we present this to a judge, she doesn't just lose the house. She could be facing prosecution. Does she understand that? She thinks she can fix it, I said. She thinks if she sells the serum, she can pay back the loan. She is not living in reality. Mark leaned forward. Then we have to force her into reality. We're going to file an emergency motion. We are asking for exclusive occupancy of the marital residence. We are arguing that her continued presence in the house poses a financial and psychological threat. And we are attaching this fraud report. He paused, then added a warning. But you need to be careful, James. When a cornered animal realizes the cage is locked, it bites. You're living with a person who has already committed a felony against you. Do not underestimate what she might do when she realizes the business excuse won't save her. I nodded, feeling a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I have a deadbolt on my door. Mark shook his head. A deadbolt is wood and steel. It stops a person, but it doesn't stop an accusation. It doesn't stop a false narrative. You need to be vigilant. If she tries to engage you, record it. If she threatens you, leave the room. Do not touch her. Do not even raise your voice. We have the winning hand, James. The only way you lose is if you give her ammunition to paint you as the aggressor. I left his office an hour later, stepping out into the gray afternoon. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets of Columbus damp and reflective. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The winning hand. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like I was preparing to detonate a bomb in the foundation of my own life. Driving home, I felt a familiar dread settling over me. The house, once my sanctuary, had become a zone of hostile operations. Every time I pulled into the driveway, I had to steel myself, checking my emotional armor, making sure there were no chinks she could exploit. When I entered the house, the silence was different. It wasn't the heavy, sullen silence of the past few days. It was sharp, alert. I walked into the kitchen. It was empty. The counters were wiped clean. The dishwasher was humming. It was too normal. I checked the garage. The car was there. She was home. I went upstairs, my footsteps muffled by the carpet. I reached the door of the guest bedroom, my bunker. I reached into my pocket for the key to the deadbolt. That was when I noticed it. I had been placing a small piece of clear tape at the very bottom of the doorframe every morning before I left. It was an old trick I had read about in a spy novel years ago, something I never thought I would use in real life. If the door was opened, the tape would detach or break. The tape was gone. I froze. I looked at the lock. It looked undisturbed. No scratches on the metal. But the tape didn't lie. Someone had opened this door. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I unlocked the deadbolt and pushed the door open. The room looked exactly as I'd left it. The bed was made. The suitcase was in the corner. My laptop was on the desk. I walked over to the desk. I had left a stack of papers there, copies of the bank statements and the preliminary draft of the divorce petition Mark had given me earlier in the week. I opened the folder. It was empty. I checked the drawers. Empty. She had been in here. She had picked the lock or found the spare key I thought I had lost years ago, and she had gone through my things. She had taken the legal documents. I felt a surge of violation so intense it made my hands shake. It wasn't just about the papers. Mark had digital copies of everything. It was the breach. She had invaded the 1 square footage of space I had claimed for my sanity. She wanted me to know that there were no boundaries she wouldn't cross. I turned around and walked out of the room. I didn't yell. I didn't call out her name. I walked straight to the master bedroom. The door was open. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to me. She was holding the papers in her lap. She was reading the divorce petition, the section where Mark had outlined the fraudulent conveyance of the home equity line. She didn't turn around when I entered. She just spoke, her voice eerily calm. Fraud, she read aloud. Intentional deception. Malicious intent. She turned slowly. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red, but dry. She looked at me with a terrifying mixture of fear and fury. Is this what you think of me, James? That I am malicious? That I am a criminal? I stood in the doorway, keeping my distance. I remembered Mark's warning. Do not engage. Do not escalate. I think you forged my signature. Emily, I said, my voice steady. I think you took out a loan without my knowledge. The law calls that fraud. I am just calling it what it is. She stood up, the papers crumpling in her fist. I did it for us. How many times do I have to say it? I was going to pay it back. You can't pay back $100,000 with expired shampoo, Emily, I said. And you broke into my room. You stole my legal documents. That is another line you have crossed. She threw the papers at me. They fluttered to the floor like wounded birds. I live here too, she screamed. There are no locked doors in a marriage. You are treating me like a tenant, like a stranger. You are a stranger, I said. The woman I married wouldn't have done this. She took a step toward me, her hands clenched into fists. You are trying to destroy me. You want to send me to jail? Is that it? You want to see your wife in handcuffs? I want to not be responsible for your debt, I said. I want to save my credit. I want to salvage what is left of my life. If that means you face consequences for your actions, then yes. That is what has to happen. Her expression shifted. The rage dissolved into a cold, calculating sneer. She looked at me, assessing my stance, my calmness. She realized that her shouting wasn't working. She realized that the papers she held were proof that I was done, that there was no reconciliation, only a legal machine moving forward to crush her. You think you're so smart, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You think you have all the evidence. But evidence is just a story, James. And I can tell stories too. I frowned. What are you talking about? She took a step back, moving toward the hallway. You're a big, strong man, James. And I am just a scared, fragile woman. Who do you think the police will believe? The word police hung in the air. Emily, don't do this, I said, backing away slightly. She smiled. It was a broken, tragic smile. You left me no choice. You cut off my money. You locked me out of your life. You're trying to take the house. Well, if I lose the house, you lose it too. She turned and walked quickly toward the top of the stairs. Emily, I called out, an instinctive warning. She stopped at the landing. She looked back at me one last time. There was a moment of hesitation in her eyes, a flicker of the woman she used to be, terrified of the cliff she was about to jump off. But then, the desperation took over. The need to win, or at least to make me lose, was stronger than her self-preservation. You should have just given me the $5,000, she whispered. Then, she did the unthinkable. She grabbed the banister with one hand, let out a piercing, blood-curdling scream. No, James. Stop, please. And threw herself backwards. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. She didn't just stumble, she launched herself. Her body hit the steps with a sickening series of thuds. She tumbled down the carpeted flight, her limbs flailing, hitting the wall, the railing, the steps. Thump, thump, crash. She landed in a heap at the bottom of the stairs in the foyer. Silence followed. Absolute, ringing silence. I stood at the top of the landing, paralyzed. My breath was stuck in my throat. My mind couldn't process the visual data. She had thrown herself down the stairs. She had staged an assault. Then the groaning started. She was moving. She curled into a ball, clutching her shoulder. James, she whimpered, loud enough to be heard if neighbors were listening. Why did you push me? I didn't move. I couldn't go down there. If I went down there, I would be standing over her. It would look exactly like what she wanted it to look like. She reached into her pocket with her good arm and pulled out her phone. She dialed 3 numbers. I heard the faint, tinny voice of the dispatcher. 911. What is your emergency? My husband. She sobbed into the phone, her voice thick with pain and performance. My husband pushed me down the stairs. I think my arm is broken. Please, send help. He is still looking at me. She looked up at me as she said it, her eyes locking onto mine from the bottom of the stairs. There was no regret in them, only a cold challenge. Checkmate. I stepped back into the shadows of the hallway. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. This was it, the nuclear option. She was going to have me arrested for domestic violence. I would be removed from the house. She would get the protective order. She would get exclusive occupancy. And the fraud investigation would be derailed by the criminal assault charges against me. It was a brilliant, evil plan. But as the sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, cutting through the evening air, I felt a strange, icy calm wash over me. I reached into my pocket and touched my phone. I didn't dial 911. I didn't call Mark. I just stood there and waited. The next 10 minutes were a blur of chaotic noise. The front door burst open. Paramedics rushed in. 2 police officers followed, their hands resting on their holsters, their eyes scanning the scene. They saw Emily on the floor, weeping, clutching her shoulder. They saw the bruise forming on her forehead. They saw the victim. Then they looked up and saw me standing at the top of the stairs. A man, silent, watching. Sir, keep your hands where we can see them. One officer shouted, starting up the stairs. I raised my hands slowly, palms open. I'm not moving, officer. Come down slowly. Turn around. I walked down the stairs. The paramedics were working on Emily. She was crying louder now, telling them he was so angry he just shoved me. I tried to grab the railing. The officer reached me. He spun me around, roughly pushing me against the wall. He patted me down for weapons. You are under arrest for domestic assault, he said, his voice hard. You have the right to remain silent. I waited until he finished the Miranda warning. Emily was being loaded onto a stretcher. She looked at me as they wheeled her past. A look of triumph. She had won. I was in handcuffs. Officer, I said, my voice calm, though my throat felt like sandpaper. Before you take me in, there is something you need to see. The officer tightened his grip on my arm. You can tell it to the judge, buddy. It is not a statement, I said. It is evidence. Look up. The officer frowned. What? Look at the ceiling, I said. Above the stairs. He hesitated, then looked up. Directly above the landing, mounted on the ceiling, was a white, circular device. It looked like a standard smoke detector, but it wasn't. What is that? The officer asked. It is a high-definition motion-activated camera, I said. I installed it 3 days ago on the advice of my attorney. It records directly to the cloud. It covers the hallway and the entire staircase. The silence that fell over the foyer was different this time. It wasn't the silence of tragedy. It was the silence of a plot twisting. The officer looked at me, then at the camera, then back at the open door where the paramedics were wheeling Emily out. Do you have access to the footage? He asked, his tone shifting from aggression to caution. It is on my phone, I said, which is in my right pocket. He reached into my pocket and pulled out the phone. Unlock it. I gave him the passcode. He opened the app. I watched his face as he played the last recorded clip. He watched the screen. He saw Emily standing at the top of the stairs. He saw me standing 10 feet away from her. He saw her scream. He saw her grab the railing and throw herself backward. He saw me standing frozen, never once touching her. He watched it twice. Then he looked at his partner, who was standing by the door. "Steve," he said, "hold the transport." The officer, Steve, looked confused. "What?" "She is injured." "She is injured," the first officer said, handing the phone to his partner. "But he didn't do it. She did it to herself." Steve watched the video. His eyes widened. "Holy smoke." The first officer uncuffed me. The metal clicked open, and the blood rushed back into my wrists. "I am sorry, sir," he said, his demeanor completely changed. He looked embarrassed and angry. Angry at being used. "What happens now?" I asked, rubbing my wrists. The officer looked out the door where the ambulance was waiting. "Now, we go have a talk with your wife. And instead of you going to the station, I think we're going to be filing a very different kind of report. Filing a false police report is a crime. Attempting to frame someone for a felony is a crime." I walked to the door and watched. The officers walked up to the ambulance. They stopped the paramedics from closing the doors. They spoke to Emily. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the reaction. I saw Emily's face go from pained victim to shocked realization. I saw her look back at the house, at the open door where I stood. She saw me. She saw the phone in the officer's hand. She knew. She tried to sit up, arguing, waving her good arm. The officer shook his head. He wasn't buying it anymore. The performance was over. The curtain had fallen, and the house lights were on. The ambulance drove away, taking her to the hospital to treat the shoulder she had broken for nothing. The police officers came back inside to take my official statement and to download the video file as evidence. When they finally left, an hour later, the house was quiet again. I stood in the foyer, looking at the bottom of the stairs. There was a scuff mark on the wall where her shoe had hit. That was the only physical trace of the chaos. I walked into the kitchen. I poured a glass of water. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. The adrenaline was crashing. I sat down on the floor, leaning against the refrigerator. I had won. I had survived the trap, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. I looked around the empty kitchen. This was my life now. A house that was a crime scene. A garage full of garbage. A wife who was likely going to face charges for fraud and filing a false report. I remember the day we bought this house. We had stood in this kitchen, drinking champagne from paper cups, dreaming about which walls to paint or to put the Christmas tree. We had been happy, or at least I thought we were. I realized then that I was grieving. I wasn't grieving the woman who had just thrown herself down the stairs. That woman was a stranger, a monster born of desperation and narcissism. I was grieving the memory of the woman I thought she was. I was grieving the years of my life that I had poured into a vessel that had no bottom. My phone buzzed. It was Mark. "James, the police contacted me. I heard what happened. Are you okay?" I typed back slowly. "I am alive. The camera saved me. I am filing for an immediate restraining order," Mark replied. "She won't be coming back to the house after she is discharged. We have the leverage now to dictate every single term of the settlement. It is over, James." I put the phone down. It is over. I stood up and walked to the front door. I locked it. Then I engaged the deadbolt. Then I set the alarm system. I walked up the stairs, past the spot where she had jumped. I didn't look down. I went into the guest bedroom, my room. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. Thud. I was safe. The perimeter was secure. But as I lay down on the single bed in the darkness, listening to the wind against the siding, I knew that the silence of the house would never be peaceful again. It was the silence of a battlefield after the shooting stops, where the only thing left to do is count the casualties and wonder if the victory was worth the cost. I closed my eyes and waited for the morning. I had a house to sell. I had a divorce to finish. And somewhere, under the layers of betrayal and exhaustion, I had a life to find. The apartment was quiet in a way the house on Maple Drive never had been. It was a silence that felt earned, a clean, sharp stillness that smelled of lemon polish and solitude. I sat on the beige sofa I had bought secondhand from a colleague, looking out the sliding glass door at the parking lot of the complex. It was March now. The relentless gray rain of November had given way to a tentative, blustery spring. The trees lining the asphalt were showing the first haze of green buds, a promise that life, eventually, insists on returning. My new world was 600 square feet. It was a one-bedroom unit on the second floor of a building called The Pines, a name that promised a rustic charm the architecture did not deliver. But it was mine. The lease was in my name. The electric bill was in my name. The internet was in my name. And most importantly, the bank account that paid for it all was accessible only by me. It had been 4 months since the night the police took Emily away. For months of legal attrition, forensic accounting, and the systematic dismantling of a life I had spent 7 years building. The house was gone. That was the hardest part to accept, at least initially. The bank had agreed to a short sale to avoid the lengthy foreclosure process, a mercy brokered by Mark's relentless negotiation. We had walked away with nothing. The equity I thought we had, the nest egg I had worked overtime for, had been vaporized by the high-interest loan Emily had forged. The proceeds of the sale barely covered the principal of the mortgage and the lien. I was 32 years old, and financially I was back to where I had been at 22. 0 assets, a bruised credit score, and a used Honda Civic. But as I drank my coffee, cheap, instant coffee that tasted better than any artisanal blend I had ever brewed in that granite kitchen, I realized I didn't miss the house. The house had been a stage, a set piece for a play where I didn't know I was the antagonist. This apartment, with its thin walls and laminate countertops, was reality, and reality was lighter than I expected. I checked the time on my phone. 10 o'clock. I had to leave in 20 minutes. Today was the end, the final signature, the decree absolute. I stood up and walked to the small closet. My wardrobe had shrunk just like my living space. I pulled out a gray suit, the one I used to wear for client meetings. It felt slightly loose. I had lost 15 pounds since November. The divorce diet, Mark had called it with grim humor. Stress burns calories faster than a treadmill. I dressed methodically, tightening my tie in a mirror. I looked different. The lines around my eyes were deeper, etched by sleepless nights and the harsh glare of legal documents. But my eyes were clear. The fog of confusion, the constant low-level anxiety of waiting for the other shoe to drop, it was gone. I knew exactly where the shoes were. I had thrown them all out. I remember the weekend I cleared out the garage before handing the keys to the realtor. It had taken 2 days and a rented dumpster. The wall of cardboard boxes, the monument to Emily's delusion, had to be dismantled by hand. I had spent hours slicing tape, pouring thousands of dollars of expired revitalizing serum and dietary supplements into heavy-duty trash bags. The smell had been overpowering, a sickly sweet, chemical floral scent that coated my throat. It was a physical exorcism. With every bottle I tossed, I felt a tether snapping. I realized that these weren't just products. They were crystallized lies. Every bottle represented a moment where she chose fantasy over our marriage. Every box was a decision to deceive. By the time the garage was empty, swept clean of dust and dried egg yolk, I felt a profound sense of pity. She had mortgaged her soul for pink plastic bottles that ended up in a landfill. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. The drive to the meeting place was short. We weren't meeting at Mark's office, and certainly not at a court. We had opted for a neutral ground to sign the final settlement agreement, a mediation center downtown that had private rooms and decent coffee. It was a sterile environment, designed to strip emotion from the process of separation. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat in the waiting room, flipping through an old magazine without reading the words. I was rehearsing my state of mind. Calm, detached, brief. Mark came out to greet me. He looked pleased, holding a thick folder. "She is here," he said, keeping his voice low. "Her lawyer is with her. The terms are exactly as we discussed. She takes the remaining debt from the Lux and company disaster. In exchange, you aren't pressing criminal charges for the forgery or the false police report. She gets a clean record. You get a clean financial slate." It was a plea bargain in all but name. The district attorney had been interested in the false report case. The video evidence was damning, but I had declined to cooperate. I didn't want a trial. I didn't want to see her in a witness box. I didn't want to be the husband who sent his wife to jail. I just wanted her gone. The leverage of the potential felony charge was enough to force her to accept total liability for the debt. It was the only justice I was going to get, and it was enough. "Let's get over with," I said. We walked into the conference room. It was a windowless box with a round table and uncomfortable chairs. Emily was already seated. I hadn't seen her since the night the ambulance took her away. For months. 120 days. She looked smaller. That was the first thing that struck me. The larger-than-life presence she used to project, the frantic energy, the glamour, it was muted. She was wearing a simple beige sweater and dark trousers. Her hair, usually highlighted and styled to perfection, was pulled back in a loose ponytail. She wore very little makeup. She looked up when I entered. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, I braced myself for the manipulation. I expected tears. I expected anger. I expected the look of the victim. But there was none of that. There was just exhaustion. She looked like someone who had been running a marathon in high heels and had finally collapsed. "James," she said. Her voice was quiet, raspy. "Emily," I nodded, taking the seat opposite her. I didn't offer my hand. I didn't ask how she was. Her lawyer, a weary-looking man who clearly wanted to be anywhere else, pushed a stack of papers across the table. "Standard dissolution agreement," he mumbled. "Separation of assets, or lack thereof. Allocation of liabilities. Mutual waiver of spousal support. Just need signatures on the tab pages." I took out my pen. It was a heavy metal pen I had bought for myself as a celebration when I signed the lease on my apartment. A symbol of my own authority. I began to sign. James A. Miller. James A. Miller. I watched my own hand. The signature was firm, consistent. Unlike the jagged scrawl on the loan documents, this was the mark of a man who knew exactly what he was agreeing to. Emily watched me sign. She was fidgeting with the cuff of her sweater. "I am sorry about the house," she said suddenly. The room went silent. Mark stiffened beside me, ready to intervene, but I held up a hand. I stopped writing and looked at her. "It is just brick and wood, Emily," I said. "It can be replaced." "I didn't mean for it to end like this," she continued, her eyes glistening. "I really didn't. I got it over my head. I panicked. The things I said, the things I did, it was like I was watching someone else do them." I listened to her words. A part of me, the old part, wanted to comfort her, wanted to say, "It's okay, we all make mistakes." But the new part, the part forged in the fire of the last 4 months, heard this subtle deflection. It was like I was watching someone else. Even now, at the bitter end, she couldn't fully own it. It was a dissociation, a way to distance herself from the malice of her choices. "It doesn't matter anymore," I said gently but firmly. "It is done. We are done." I pushed the papers toward her. She looked at the documents. The weight of the debt she was assuming was printed there in black and white. It was a heavy burden for a receptionist to carry. She would be paying for those bottles of expired serum for the next 10 years. She picked up the pen. Her hand trembled slightly. She signed, "Emily Miller." It was over. The scratching of the pen on paper was the sound of a guillotine falling, severing the bond. She put the pen down and looked at me. There was a flicker of something in her eyes then, a spark of the old Emily, a flash of calculation. "So what will you do now?" she asked. I stood up, buttoning my jacket. I'm going to work. Then I'm going to go home. Home, she echoed. To your apartment. Yes. She hesitated, then stood up as well. She leaned slightly across the table. I miss you, James, she whispered. Not the money. Not the house. I miss us. Saturday mornings. The coffee. I looked at her. I remember the coffee. I remembered the cold cup sitting on the counter while she threatened to sleep with her ex-boyfriend. I remembered the silence. I said. The words were not cruel. They were just true. And the truth, I had learned, was the only thing that mattered. Her face fell. She nodded slowly, accepting the defeat. Good luck, Emily, I said. I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. Mark followed me, clapping me on the shoulder as we stepped into the hallway. Congratulations, he said. You are a free man. I walked out of the building into the cool spring air. The sun had broken through the clouds. The pavement was drying. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that felt cleaner, lighter. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, resting my hands on the wheel. I expected to feel a wave of emotion, grief, anger, joy. But mostly, I just felt a quiet humming sensation. It was the feeling of a machine that had been broken for a long time, finally running smooth. I took out my phone to send a text to my sister to tell her it was done. As I unlocked the screen, a notification popped up. It was from LinkedIn. I must have checked Emily's profile months ago during the investigation, and the algorithm, in its infinite, unfeeling wisdom, decided to update me. Emily Miller has started a new position. Curiosity, that old fatal flaw, got the better of me. I tapped the notification. The profile loaded. There was a new photo. She looked radiant, airbrushed, professional. The exhaustion I had seen in the conference room was nowhere to be found here. This was the avatar, the mask. Position, regional lifestyle consultant. Company, Pure Living Global. I froze. I tapped on the company name. A website loaded. It was sleek, full of stock photos of waterfalls and bamboo. Holistic wellness. Financial independence. Be your own CEO. It was another one. Another pyramid. Another scheme. I scrolled down. Beneath the job update, there was a status update posted 10 minutes ago. 10 minutes. She must have typed it in the lobby while waiting for me, or perhaps immediately after I left the room. So excited to start this new chapter, leaving the toxicity behind and focusing on growth and abundance. Grateful for the support of my mentor and partner, Thomas, who believes in my vision when others didn't. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag entrepreneur, hashtag boss babe. I stared at the screen, leaving the toxicity behind. That was me. I was the toxicity. I was the husband who objected to the forgery and the debt. And Thomas. I clicked on the tag. Thomas was a man in his late 50s. Silver hair, expensive suit, standing in front of a convertible. He looked kind. He looked wealthy. He looked like a provider. He looked like a target. She hadn't learned. She hadn't changed. She had simply pivoted. The debt she just signed for? She probably spun it to Thomas as unfair legal fees from an abusive divorce. She was already building the next house of cards, using the same blueprint, just on a different lot. I felt a chill run down my spine. It was a moment of horror, realizing that the monster wasn't dead. It had just moved on to a new village. But then the chill faded, because she wasn't in my village anymore. I closed the app. I deleted LinkedIn from my phone. I started the car. The engine purred to life. I turned on the radio. An old classic rock song was playing, something about rambling on, about moving forward. I pulled out of the parking lot and merged into traffic. I wasn't going back to the apartment right away. I was hungry, not for a fancy dinner, not for rosemary chicken and candlelight. I pulled into a drive-thru. I ordered a cheeseburger and a chocolate shake. I paid with my own debit card. Transaction approved. I parked in a spot overlooking the river. I ate the burger, watching the water flow past. It was murky and brown, swollen with the spring thaw, but kept moving. It didn't stop for anything. It just flowed, carrying the debris of winter toward the ocean. I took a sip of the shake. It was cold and sweet. I thought about Thomas. I felt a moment of sympathy for him, a stranger I would never meet. He had no idea what was coming, but I couldn't save him. You can't save people who want to believe in the illusion. I had tried for 7 years. I looked at the empty passenger seat. It was just upholstery. It wasn't waiting for anyone. It wasn't judging me. It was just a seat. I smiled. It was a small smile, tentative but real. I was broke. I was divorced. I was living in a box. But for the first time in a decade, I was solvent. My soul was my own. My name was my own. I put the car in reverse. I had a shipment to route to Detroit. I had a laundry to do. I had a life to live. The rearview mirror showed the empty road behind me. I didn't adjust it. I didn't look for a car. I didn't check the blind spot for ghosts. I just drove, and the road ahead, though ordinary and gray, was wide open.